Okay, so today's topic is going to be rule beliefs, going into the rules we live by and assessing them to see what they are and if they're serving us or not. We all have these internal rules we're living by, and it can create blockages to happiness, success, and they determine everything about us, like where we go, what we wear, who we are, what's acceptable or unacceptable. And if we get down to the bottom of some of these and replace them, it can alleviate a lot of our stress so we can feel more free. And we can learn how to create better attitudes for the parts of our life that are very relevant. And today, the ones that we're going to discuss are worthiness, pain and suffering, rejection, and the success of other people. So those are 4 different things that are very relevant to every human experience that we need to make sure we have really good rule beliefs on. Okay? And the important thing is not whether or not the rule we live by is true, because there's a lot of disempowering facts. Our facts can mislead us if we're focusing on one truthful thing that's kind of one aspect of a greater truth that might be a little bit more discouraging. The main thing is whether or not it's actually serving us, okay? So let's go into this one here. We'll start off with the success of others. So here's how we do this, okay? I'm going to get you to just fill in the blank. And I want you to just let bubble up from your brain whatever answer comes to mind. Like, that's your rule belief. No matter how dumb it sounds or how you're like, oh, that's horrible, I can't believe I said that. We just want to know what it is that bubbles up. So it's like this. Finish the sentence. The success of others, what? What comes after that? The success of others, fill in the blank. Finish that sentence. And there's all kinds of ways people
lifts other people up.
Sorry, what was that?
The success of others lifts other people up, inspires others.
Okay. And does it do anything for you at all in particular? Because it's lifting others up, but do you find it does that for you?
Yes. Yeah, it just show that it's possible. Once you see somebody able to do, I don't know, like a quadruple Salchow or whatever in ice skating. I'm watching the Olympics right now. And then it becomes possible, then you might be able to do it. Excellent,
good. So basically your rule belief is the success of others inspires me and shows me what's possible.
Yeah.
Excellent, good. Chris and Charmaine, anything come up for you that you want to care to share? Oh, you guys are both on.
Mute. The success of others depends on them. That it is their beliefs, their sacrifices, their goals, their work that either builds or tears down their life. And it might be independent of my path or my journey. So we may not be as connected. When you're talking about somebody else's sales, I'm not sure it's someone who's close to you, someone you're a teammate of, or someone that you're just seeing from the outside who you're disconnected to. So like Ceylon said, it can be inspiring or it can be something different. But really how they live their life is a reflection of what their beliefs are as well.
Perfect. Okay, so basically the success of others depends on them, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Go on. All right, Charmaine, the success of others. What is your rule?
I mean, kind of like what Chris was saying, it depends on my relationship with them. Like if I've helped mentor them, then, and I see them succeed, that makes me feel rewarded. Sometimes it makes me reflect on myself to see, am I doing things right or should I be doing things differently? And I'll just say it. Sometimes if you don't think they deserve it, it makes you jealous. I mean, or you're wondering, why is it people who, don't work as hard or don't try as hard or whatever, why do they find the success? And I mean, that's not a normal reaction for me, but I've certainly felt that way with some people.
Excellent. Yeah. So we got a mixed bag with you. It's like the success of others can make me feel rewarded, can make me feel jealous, it can be unfair. So we have a whole mixed bag that's coming out for you, right?
It's very individualistic on the responses for me.
Well, I'd say it's yeah, your rule is just kind of, and some people have rules like that just kind of go in a whole bunch of different directions. And we just have a lot of mixed emotions about it. And at a different time, in different ways, different things can come out of us with that. And then Patty Baker, do you want to tell us your little rule here?
The success of others inspires me to do great things. That was the first thing that came to my mind, because I think no matter who they are, they've done whatever they've done to become successful, that I can learn or at least filter through, even if they got successful out of a way that wasn't really a moral way or anything like that. I can still look at it and go, you know what, they're successful, and I'm glad I'm not being successful that way, you know, or they inspire me not to get successful that way or whatever. So I think anybody who's successful inspires me, and I can learn from them.
Perfect. So, you know, what I'm hearing is it's the success of others inspires me to do great things, and it has learning value. It has learning value no matter what. I think that's a great attitude. So now we're gonna
Similar to mine. What
Yeah,
about
yeah.
you, Brendan?
there you go. Yeah. So we're gonna assess this because lots of stress and resentment comes from our attitude towards the success of others. And the rule we tell ourselves can lead to things like jealousy and some of these emotions that can weaken us. So we want to make sure that we just kind of purify what we tell ourselves about the success of other people. So everyone, we're going to score our rules out of 5, okay, to see how it measures up. Now, however your rule scores, I believe it's not your fault if it's a 0 out of 5 or it's only a 1 out of 5, because I don't think any of us have been properly trained on how to develop the rules we should live by related to a lot of the factors we're talking about today. So we're all untrained in this, but now we can take the time to kind of, you know, take the time to assess where we're at with some of this stuff and take some responsibility and make ourselves better in future if we can. So here's number 1 for 1 point. Does your rule encourage and energize you instead of dampening your enthusiasm? Yes or no? Does it encourage and energize you? Because the success of other people is always going to be there. And we want to know that this encourages us, energizes us, and doesn't drain us. So you'd give yourself 1 point. So an example, a bad example of a rule here might be that somebody says the success of others lowers my value, which is what some people say when they're asked this. Well, that's going to dampen our enthusiasm. That wouldn't get a point here. A bad one might be the success of others is a painful reminder of my own unrealized goals. So obviously that rule wouldn't get a point here. Okay. Now, number 2 is, does it give you the control instead of handing the control over to others? Does it give you the control instead of handing the control over to others? So somebody might say the success of others is another lost opportunity for my own success, or the success of others blocks me from succeeding. In that way, we're passing over the control, right? So we'd say no on that one, if those were the kind of answers we have, okay? Now, number 3 is this. Does it lead to gratitude and acceptance instead of entitlement and expectation? So if we say the success of others is often unearned, that doesn't make us really feel grateful, right? Or if we say the success of others takes away my turn to shine, then that doesn't really lead to gratitude and acceptance either. So those would be bad examples there. So if it leads to gratitude and acceptance, we give it another point, okay? Now, number 4 is this. Is it focused on the process instead of an end result? So we're going to score it on this. For example, the success of others proves the lack of my own success in life. That's almost like an end result. All right. So we want to say, is it focused on process or end result? And then number 5 is, does it focus on what matters most to help you be the kind of person you need to be to create the outcomes you want in life? Does it focus you on what matters most to help you out in life? Okay, so the last rule number 5, does it focus us on what matters most to help us out in life, basically? So at this point, we'd have a total score out of 5. You should be able to score it. How many yeses did you get out of 5? And if it's not a 5, then now's an opportunity to upgrade to something better. Because essentially we want to train ourselves to be happy for the success of other people. You cannot succeed at being your best self. You cannot succeed at life if you don't discipline yourself to be happy for the success of other human beings, because it's going to be a part of your human experience, no matter what. Right?
I need a little bit more explanation for number 4.
Okay, number 4 is it focused on the process instead of an end result. So it's kind of like being more growth focused instead of a fixed mindset. So that we still have the opportunity to get better, that it's not over yet, because a lot of people might be like, well, my life is a failure because of the success of others.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we should have a score, and then you can kind of take a look at, a lot of these, like Patty, I think yours and Celine's are probably a 5, I would guess, just to guess off the top of my head. So we could borrow or try out their rules on this. If we don't have a 5, we could say, okay, I'm going to try using Celine's rule because it's an empowering rule. It gives us more strength, or Patty's rule, or we can come up with something else, right? We could say the success of others is a tool for our own success by showing what's possible for us and paving the way. You could say it's an inspirational educational event that instructs me on how I can achieve my higher potential. We could say it's a recipe I can use to help me evolve and expand, right? And it shows me what's possible for myself if I do the things they've done, right? So there's a lot of different ways we could train ourselves to have a better rule for this. Anyone have any thoughts on that? The success of others?
I think I need a rule.
Yeah, no problem.
I don't think I had one.
Yeah, so what you want to do is pick something that's going to be a 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
So out of all the things I just shared there, or even Celine and Patty's rule, what did you like? What appeals to you?
What appealed to me, I liked what Patty was saying, because I do have a really good attitude about it most of the time, but there's times where I don't necessarily think people are deserving, but turning that mentally where I'm thinking of, this is an example of what I don't want to be, and like looking to succeed in a different way in which they had, I think is a lot more, it's a more empowering way to respond to those scenarios where I don't necessarily feel, encouraged by it currently. So
yeah. So we might want to shift from judging to learning.
Yeah.
Right. So we want to shift from judgment to curiosity instead of they don't deserve it or this is unfair. Like, wow, what can I learn from this? What am I learning, about the situation and what's possible and everything else, right? So we could place the emphasis more on the learning piece, right?
Yep.
Right. Somebody is not deserving. You wonder, like, how did they get there? I want to know the shortcut.
There you go. See what she did there? Celine draws strength from it, right? So she got a 5 out of 5, but she's like, how did they get there? Is there a shortcut? Maybe this will help me learn a faster way to get there. I want to be undeserving too and have success.
Yes, that's right. I want to be undeserving.
See, she's choosing curiosity instead of judgment, right? So that's what we want to do. We want to select an attitude that's going to bring us closer to what we want in life.
Thank you, Celine. I appreciate that.
She nailed it. Mouse drop with Celine on that one. Hey, so I threw a bunch of those into the chat. You can like copy them, paste them, pick one, or pick Celine or Patty's that they mentioned earlier. And just own it. Just pick one and own it. And just really cement it in, reinforce it. And there's many ways you can do this. One is you just take your new rules you're going to live by, and reread them at every meal. You're going to eat anyway, so just stack it with another habit until it gets internalized and it becomes a part of you. You could see that this attitude was a part of Celine. Came out of her without even thinking. She was already saying and doing the right things. Her mind was going to the right place because she's got a 5 out of 5 rule on this subject, right? And I'm willing to bet she's had a lot of success in her life simply because of her attitude towards the success of others. That it's kind of lifted her up. She's used it as a stepping stone. All right, excellent. Now we're going to go on to number 2 of 4. We're going through 4 tonight. Okay, this is our worthiness rule. What has to happen in order for you to feel worthy? I need you to answer that question. What has to happen in order for you to, because, and just what is bubbling up from you, from your brain for this? No matter how silly it sounds, how wrong it sounds, we just want to give ourselves the space to just see what bubbles up from our brain, because that's going to be our rule, right? So people will say things like, I need to feel useful and appreciated, or, you know, I need to have an impact, or, you know, I need to have a house and I need to have a spouse, right? Like,
Now this question got me thinking of that movie Encanto, and if you have kids, probably watching it a gazillion times. But there's a song in there by one of the sisters who's really, you know, strong, and she sings "Under the Surface" or "Surface Pressure" is a song, and she says, "I'm not worthy if I'm not of service to other people," and it's like the mantra that a lot of moms feel, that we have to bear the weight of the entire family. So for me, what I feel, I'm only worthy if I can be of service to my family and my community and everybody around, right?
yeah, and even though that was featured in a Disney movie, I would submit to you that attitude leads to caregiver burnout. Because I know that so many people have told themselves that, and it was, and leading to a bit of resentment as they burn themselves out in service to others, because it's a beautiful opportunity to be able to do that for people. But once we hinge our worth to it, that can take it to a toxic level in many ways. So yeah. So anyway, we'll just come up with but yeah, I can see why it sounds good, but why don't we take that rule and a bunch of other ones and see what we come up with in terms of how empowering it is. Anyone else care to share their thoughts on worthiness rule? And if you want, you can just throw it into the chat. You don't have to share it on the video or anything, but
I'm not sure how to say mine exactly, but I have to feel like I've done something. Like if I've done nothing and I get something, I don't feel worthy. So I have to feel like, and it's contributing in some way. I don't know that I have a value on it or how much I have to contribute, but it can't feel undeserved. I guess maybe that's it's almost better to say it in the reverse. I don't know if that's helpful.
You know, you did say it. You said I have to have done something. And we could break that down, but it's a performance related rule rather than a potential related rule. Like that's the key thing with it. I have to have done something. So no, that's good. That's what's bubbling up. So am I frozen? I'm sorry if I'm frozen here. Darn it.
Healthy snacks, and a collection of nuts, mixed nuts, which would be similar to this group.
I don't know what was
thanks for
gone. I
sharing
was
your
gone for
dinner.
like 10 seconds. My internet cut out and you guys are talking about mixed nuts. All right. This call
That's where
really
it must
went
root.
sideways fast. Chris,
So Chris,
sorry I missed it. Did you have anything to share on worthiness rule? Any thoughts or?
On the worthiness rule, I came up with, I need to feel accomplished and I need to feel respected. And I'm trying to think, well, what do you mean by accomplished? And so I'm thinking things that I have completed, but I think things around the business, or the family business, around myself personally. And because I don't have those things going on necessarily, I don't feel respected or, yeah, pretty much that. So, I mean, it's really showing a lot of where my vulnerabilities are in some areas I need to work on. Not because I'm not going to need to have those accomplishments, but why am I giving so much value and disvaluing myself?
Yeah, perfect. Hey, you know what? You're courageous, man. Like that is to be able to say, hey, here's my rule, and I'm giving a lot of value to this stuff, and I know it's probably not a good idea. Awesome. Courageous of you. Like, here's my rule, but you know what? You're innocent. I think everybody here is. We have not been properly trained on this stuff. And the rules we tell ourselves, like what needs to happen in order to feel worthy, is so central to our reality and being the best version of ourselves in this life we have. And yet we don't talk about this stuff and we don't audit it. And we've got a group of people who are here passionate about self-development, and yet we still get confused ideas into our head. So let's take some of these rules. We got, in order to feel worthy, I need to feel accomplished and respected. I need to have done something, we've got, I need to bring value to others and caring for creation. We've got a bunch of different things in here. So let's just see how they measure up. We want something empowering, 5 out of 5 ideally. And if not, even better, that means you have the opportunity to upgrade to something better, a better way to determine your worth.
For me, I was thinking, my first thought that came out was, in order for me to feel worthy, I need to be contributing to others and taking care of the planet. And then I sat here and I go, okay, that sounds really good, but it was my knee-jerk reaction. Like, that's just what came off the top of my head. But when I wake up, I'm worthy. Like, there's that other side of it for me. Like, I'm worthy for whatever. I don't need to do anything to be worthy because I am who I am. So then there's that little attitude that came up later.
Perfect. So that attitude is going to be your real rule. We're just going to unpack it and clarify it and reinforce it.
So Patty, is that what you think, or is that how you feel? Because for me, that's a thought, but
that's what I know.
Is different.
That's what I know.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, but that for me is mental versus feeling. So I have a harder time with turning that into a feeling.
And for me, I don't know what the feeling is. Like you're saying, I put, in order for me to feel worthy, I need to be contributing and taking care of the planet. But then after I sat here talking about worthy, I'm like, I'm worthy right now. Like, I'm worthy for whatever, just because of I am.
Because you exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll unpack that. And I love Celine's comment in the chat. I'm worth it, says L'Oreal. I think the hair commercial. That's perfect. Okay. So let's take whatever rule you got here and let's all score them together. Okay. Number 1, can you satisfy this rule yourself without depending on factors outside your control, such as any other human being? Because if it requires any other human being, it's already disempowering. If in any way it requires any sort of positive impact on people, it's already a disempowering worthiness rule. A lot of times people are like, what? No, that's what it's all about. And I'm like, no, you should not tie your worth to these factors that are outside your control. Your worth does not fluctuate with these factors that are outside your control, right? So bad examples that wouldn't get a point here is, I need to have made a positive difference in my community. Well, you could be even like Jesus himself and not have a positive difference in the community, right? Like, so it doesn't necessarily say whether or not you were a good or bad person or were even doing the right things at the right time. You could be doing an impeccable job, but that is an unfair rule. We're setting up the rules of the game so we can't win, right? Number 2, for 1 point, can it be accomplished today? If your worthiness rule cannot be satisfied and fulfilled today, it's disempowering. You need worthiness within an arm's reach. It shouldn't be something way off into the distance in your reality, or you will struggle to find inner peace. Okay, so if it's like, I need a house and a spouse, I'm like, you're not going to be able to do that today. Like, you need a better worthiness rule, right? So some people might need, say, like, I need 15% more revenue by end of year. I have to, if your worthiness rule was, I have to sell $3 million homes by the end of the year, if that was your rule, like, that's not something we might necessarily going to be able to do today, right? Number 3, is it focused on potential instead of performance? Your worthiness rule should be on your potential, not your performance. So it shouldn't require us to have to do anything. Because, you know, as we talked about before, an apple seed may not be doing anything, but it has value because it can grow into something good and spread that goodness. In the same way, there's moments when human beings are not doing anything, but they are still worthy. A baby is not doing anything meaningful for society, but people still consider it worthy, right? So we don't want to be unfair to ourselves and put too much pressure and hinge worthiness to performance. That can be something that can take away our inner peace and strength, right? So sometimes people will say, I need to be ranked number 1 at my job. I need to make over 500,000 a year, whatever. Those are all performance-based worthiness rules. We want to stay away from that. Number 4, is it clear and concise instead of being obscure, vague, and ambiguous? So we want to stay away from using terms that are really hard to define, right? So somebody might say, I have to do a good job of things. Well, that's really ambiguous. How do you define a good job? When is it good enough? And where's the precise point? Or somebody might say, I have to have you know, a certain number of accomplishments. How do you define an accomplishment? What counts as an accomplishment and what doesn't? You know, there's so much gray in there that you're going to never really confidently feel worthy because you can't confidently satisfy these vague terms, right? Or somebody might say, I have to be happy. What does that mean? Happy? Like, how happy? How often do you have to be happy? Like, saying I have to be happy sounds good, but it's actually a horrible worthiness rule, right? So that's number 4. It needs to be clear and concise. Number 5, is it simple without too many conditions to satisfy all at once? So sometimes people will say, I need to be a top performing musician, you know, get rid of my shoulder pain and be below 15% body fat and bench press 250 pounds. Way too many conditions, right? We're not being fair to ourselves. So at this point, we should all have a rule. Our rule should be scored out of 5. Okay? You should give your rule a total score out of 5 to know where it stands. If it sucks, and most of the times when I get people to do worthiness rules, vast majority of the time, this is a 0 or a 1. Normally, this rule just sucks. As a society, we're not good at training people properly on how to feel worthy, right? So if it sucks, then good. The more it sucks, the better, because you can make an even bigger improvement in your reality by giving yourself a better rule here. All right.
So I think about what you're saying, and I think about I've been filtering through, and I love what we're doing here tonight, Brendan. It's awesome, by the way, because you're right. Here we are, personal self-development. We're like, wait, what? Worthiness. And I looked at it, my first thought that came out, but then after I sat there, I'm like, no, wait, I'm worthiness because I'm just existing, right? But this is what happens in the day-to-day. I always go to, how am I adding value to people? How am I taking care of creation? Then if it gets snagged up somewhere with somebody, then I'm like, well, wait, I'm worthy anyway. So I always get in that bind where if I would own the second one to begin with, I wouldn't have that in the beginning. So I see now, because of just this, my struggle with, hey, I'm doing great. I'm feeling good. I'm thinking good. I know who I am. And then all of a sudden I get snagged on somebody. And then I'm like, well, wait.
Yeah,
That's what I was alluding to before, like the head versus heart.
I'm worthy because I'm
Yeah.
worthy, but I know that deep inside, but my game is always providing value.
Yeah. So I would say, and I've been there before with conversations with people on that. And I'd say there's a couple things here. We need to really sell it. So saying I'm worthy because I'm worthy might not have as much emotional fuel as saying I'm worthy because I'm a highly capable learner with high potential inside me to create good in this world. Boom, like that is so much more. So we want something that's much more powerful and juicy if we can. Or I'm worthy because I have great potential and capacity to share love and wisdom with others. We want our worthiness rule to be on par with our potential to be helpful, but not our performance.
Yeah, and that's where the two get a little bit sideways for me.
Yeah.
The other thing is the second one that I'm owning after I get butt hurt over on the first one when the performance don't drive that well is the need for significance, right? So then I go back to significance, which is I'm worthy just because I'm standing here. So that doesn't work either. So I see where the performance versus potential has a lot of value in this rule for worthiness.
Yeah. And then I say, what you want to do is come up with that 5 out of 5 rule. And I'm gonna copy and paste the 6 of them I've come up with that score a 5 out of 5. Okay. And it's like, I need to pause and make other people feel, or I need to pay attention to all the ways I'm being loved and valued in this moment in my life. Right. So it's one thing to say I'm standing here, but then it's another thing to say, I need to focus on how I'm being loved and valued in this moment in my life, and you can go into our conversation from the knowing to know that there's some force beyond us that's governing our immune system for us and beating our heart for us and breathing us when we're sleeping and just paying attention to how loved we are. Or remembering all the moments in my life when I felt worthy and remember how I'm capable of creating more of those moments in future. Or just keep it simple. Like, in order to feel worthy, I just need to remember the good I am capable of doing. Boom, that's it. If you just need to remember the good you are capable of doing, you will feel worthy. And then you can just make somebody else feel worthy and you'll feel worthy yourself. So it comes down to, we want to get that rule that's really going to give us strength. And then ask yourself, how can I live this more deeply? How can I live this more deeply so that it becomes a part of me automatically? Because otherwise it's like painting over dirt. Our performance rule is our real hierarchy, top of the hierarchy rule. And that's what comes out of us in our day to day. It means we just need to live this new rule more deeply. Anyone have any other thoughts on worthiness rule? It's one of the most important parts about you making the most of your life. Because when you feel worthy, you're going to give yourself more strength to do what you got to do in this life.
So if I say I'm worthy of eating healthy because
I'm capable of creating lots of good in my life. Yeah. And you are. You can make people feel awesome. You can bring wisdom to people. You can make people feel loved. You just need to remember the good you're capable of.
And for me, I say, hey, I'm worthy of eating healthy because I have so many great things that I'm doing that I want to have the energy to be able to live full out and, the plans and purposes that are, over my life. So I see now what you're saying about the worthiness and how that is based upon potential rather than performance, because I always go performance.
Yeah, that's the trick. And that's how you were trained. It started with the report cards in school. Everything is performance based. That's why I'm saying you're innocent of this. Everybody is. You mean well, and intelligent people get caught in this trap all the time because of our conditioning growing up. But we need to keep our worth on our potential. If you start hinging into performance, you're going to start, it's a losing game.
And let me throw something else onto that energy thing. You can also talk about eating healthy provides energy and longevity, to consider the sustainability of that aspect. That not only are you having the energy to build the life and do the things you're doing, but also to do this over decades. So we're not just talking about the short-term vision, we're talking about things that are beyond your vision, beyond your long-term planning. So we're talking about, so when you're talking about pulling together this worthiness, potential, not only is it to be potential, but longevity of that potential.
Mm-hmm.
That's
There you go. So you can best live that potential. Yeah.
Yes.
There you go. Excellent. You know, but just remembering that we always have high potential within us that's untouchable by these outside factors. Even your performance does not influence your total potential that you can manifest. So we want to just keep that sort of, your sense of worthiness is one of the most precious and delicate things in the world. It really is. We want to treat it like that. We want to respect it like that. So another one we'll go into today, another rule is rejection rule. We all deal with rejection, okay? And so what I want to do is see what everyone's knee-jerk reaction is when I say rejection is. How does your brain fill in the blank? Rejection is. What's the first thing that bubbles up in your brain? Usually that's your rule. It doesn't matter if it doesn't sound good or you know better. It's the internal equation you live by. Don't try to filter it or deny it. We need to know it's there so we can do something productive about it, replace it with something more worthy. Rejection is. This is a bit of a playoff. We did word magic last week and
Sorry.
yeah, so rejection is. So people will say lots of things for this. They'll say rejection is not an option. They'll say rejection is me. I'm a reject. They'll say rejection is something that makes me want to crawl into a hole and die. Or rejection is painful. Rejection is a block on being accepted as a human. They'll say rejection is a misfortune, or rejection comes and goes. Rejection sucks, or rejection is a reason to quit. These are all common rejection rules. Right? And we all have a lifelong relationship with the idea of rejection. It's going to be in our life. It's a theme in our life that affects us all at one point or another. So whatever you tell yourself, that's what it is. All right. I just throw it into your chat, and if anyone wants to, Patty, you got your answers. You could just say rejection is when I'm not accepted or appreciated. Right? You just combine those two is basically what your brain is telling you. Just because your brain tells you it, though, doesn't mean we have to accept it. Chris, can you, I just need you to go on mute between talking. There you go. We're getting a lot of static there. Thank you so much for understanding, buddy. All right. So yeah, think about what does your brain say for rejection? I know Charmaine has a really good rule on this that she just came up with, and she shared it with us all. And she's sitting in the pocket right now because I feel like she's really onto this new rule. But anyway.
Rejection is redirection.
There you go. Yeah. We kind of talked about this last week. So let's all take whatever your rule is, whatever your brain answered. Let's score it 1 to 5. And if it passes this test, you can keep it. And if it doesn't pass this test, we will help you come up with something better. Okay? Go team. You don't have to put that pressure on yourself. Okay, number 1. Does your rule keep things relaxed, fun, and easy to accept instead of creating too much pressure? Okay. So we want to know that it keeps things relaxed, fun, and easy to accept. We want to have a relaxed attitude about rejection. Sounds crazy, but it's true. Lots of good people have been rejected many times, right? Like how many of Abe Lincoln's elections did he lose before eventually winning? Right? Like, so saying, rejection is not an option would be a bad rule here. It's way too much pressure. Now, number 2, does it lead to gratitude instead of fear or confusion? So if somehow what we tell ourselves about rejection makes us fearful or confused, then it's weakening us. We want to actually be grateful for that experience. We want an attitude that's going to give us more strength. So if people say, rejection is a problem to be avoided, well, that can be like fearful. We want to be like, I don't want another problem, right? Or if it's an enemy to be feared, somebody once said, so that can lead to fear and confusion. Or if it somehow has a knock on our self-worth, right? Then that might not get a point there. Number 3, is it purposeful instead of random or aimless? We want to know that in the grander scheme of things, rejection serves a purpose that we can be grateful for. So is your rule about rejection purposeful instead of random or aimless? Because if somebody says rejection is a part of being human, that doesn't seem purposeful. You might think, oh, I got a really good rule. I got this figured out. It's part of being human. Yeah, that's true, but you're not strengthening yourself as much if you have that attitude, right? So we want to know that, there's something good about it, right? Number 4, does it give you a sense of control instead of hopelessness or victimhood? Because a lot of people will say things about rejection being, in some way victimizing them. That's the implication, that we want to avoid that kind of thinking, which once again takes away our power. Does it give you a sense of control? Yes or no? And then number 5, does it lead to a productive attitude instead of apathy or indifference? Because once again, if we think rejection sucks, that doesn't lead to a productive attitude. If we think rejection is a reason to quit, that's not productive necessarily. Now, by the way, a lot of times people have a token resistance on creating a good rejection rule or creating a good worthiness rule. A lot of times people want bad rules. They make them intense and painful because they think it'll help them succeed. It'll push them to succeed. But pretty soon, what happens is you just end up feeling helpless, right? So it's a trick of the ego that we do, because there's already enough pain in life. We don't need to intensify it with these intense rules that are unfair, So we don't want to feel lousy all the time. Like, you can only do that so much to get yourself motivated. You deserve a good rejection rule. You deserve a good worthiness rule. We want to be able to go the distance here. Okay. So did anyone have any thoughts after scoring those 1 to 5? And then we'll go into some good rejection rules.
I find it interesting for me that I feel rejected when I am not accepted and not appreciated. However, when I am talking to someone who feels rejected, then I respond with everything that Celine said. So it's interesting how I receive rejection versus how I coach on rejection.
We're hard on ourselves, and there's no easier way to see it, like you said, Patty, than when someone else is going through it. We have the right instinctual responses if it's somebody else.
That's okay. We're all a work in progress, and we're figuring it out. And we get to have the joy of all hanging out together because of the fact we haven't all figured it out. Isn't that part of the fun? You know, like it's
So
like
Brendan, last week, one of the things we talked about was that Jocko video where he says good to everything.
Mhm.
And that's what it kind of reminds me of. He was so, you know, it was his instinctual response. Everything good, good. You know, this bad thing happened, good. And it was so forceful. And so, I mean, it was just his habitual response. Everyone around him was trained to know that he was going to say that. So by him saying it all the time, they immediately were thinking it, even though they hadn't been trained to think that way. It trained their thoughts as well. They're like, well, here's this problem, but we know what you're going to say. And he's like, well, what am I going to say? Good. So, I mean, you're trained by people around you too, the more you verbalize that.
Yeah. And I think there's an attitude, and it comes from a guy named Swami Kriyananda. He wrote the book, well, he didn't write the book. The book Light Bearer by Ashanaya Swami is written by him. And because I did a video book review of it this week. And what I've applied from his wisdom, it's a great way, the way he put it. He's put it like this: see everything that happens as a gift from the higher power. It's always the right thing for you because the higher power has plans that are long range. Your tests make you stronger. Sometimes a temporary setback is necessary for the achievement of some greater victory. Have faith in this truth and just accept everything with gratitude, right? Because rejection might be something we don't like, but we're judging the moment. A lot of the best things have happened to us in life because we got rejected somewhere else, right? So that's why when it comes to rejection, you know, I think it can be a necessary stepping stone on the pathway to success, right? It can be a master teacher. You know, it can be corrective information that helps us be wiser and better. You know, it can be a redirection to where we truly belong, right? Rejection is a redirection to where we truly belong. As you said, Charmaine, you found it online, rejection is God's protection. You could also say rejection plus reflection leads to progress. You could say rejection is a master teacher that helps us awaken our hidden creativity and resourcefulness, right? Think about all these different attitudes. Like these are all 5 out of 5 attitudes, right?
And to quote Jocko, rejection is good.
There you go. Yeah. So we could take from any of these concepts. It's just practice, education, and learning. Like that's all it is.
I also like the aspect when talking about rejection, we're dealing with somebody else's rejection. We go like first responders. When we deal with our own rejection, we pour kerosene on the fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like you can say we're very hard on ourselves when we're processing our own rejections. Somebody else's, we try to coach them through it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So those are some different
with ourselves.
Those are some different rejection rules. I'm throwing a bunch into the chat that are really good ones. The idea is, you know, you take some of these empowering rules we talked about, these empowering attitudes, just take what you like and then reinforce it. Reinforce it. Now, the only thing, there's something that can get to all of us, and I'm going to warn you about it right now. As much as I talk about reinforcing these life rules, some people still won't reinforce it because they let the undisciplined mind win. That's called sloth. It's mental laziness. And it basically blocks all of our progress if we keep letting the undisciplined mind win. If we keep making excuses or justifying our lack of commitment to making the sincere effort to create healing change within ourselves. We need to make these things a top priority. Like when I'm trying to learn something, I hang it in the bathroom mirror so I see it and read it every time I'm brushing my teeth, right? Like I know that I need to do this. There will be so much more pain if I do not get this into my brain now. And then get it into my brain now, and then I could just, life is going to be so much easier when I've got more wisdom going on inside me. So I think the key thing is to take ourselves seriously. We need to take ourselves seriously when we know there's a better attitude we can have. We need to make the sincere effort to really embrace that attitude and live it more deeply. So let's go on to the fourth and final rule. This is a biggie. This is one of the biggest rules out there. It's huge, okay? It is your rule on pain and suffering. Pain and suffering is what? I don't care how bad or dark it sounds, just write it out. Just what's your brain bubble up with when pain and suffering is brought to the table? What is your pain and suffering rule? Pain and suffering is whatever it is. Whatever that rule is. Everybody's got one. And most of the time, this rule is not very good, not very helpful to us. And we don't do hard things in life because of the pain and suffering rule. Okay? So sometimes people will say their rule is pain and suffering is a way to get attention from others. People use it and increase their pain and suffering to get attention. It's the wounded child phenomenon. You know, when you got hurt as a kid, people showered you with love and kissed you better. And then you start to do that as an adult in all sorts of creative ways. Okay. Pain and suffering is something I don't deserve more of. That's something somebody said. Pain and suffering is something unwanted that shouldn't happen. Pain and suffering is a threat and burden. Pain and suffering is a reminder of the injustices of the world from an unjust God. Okay? Pain and suffering blocks our ability to connect with people, clouds our thinking, disrupts our decision-making, and blocks happiness. That's a really intense rule, right? Pain and suffering is something that needs to be avoided at all costs. The person who said that really had a habit of choosing comfort over progress in their life. And just things had not moved forward in their life because of the way they looked at pain and suffering. Right?
More time, please.
Sorry, what was that?
Repeat that one more time, please.
Pain and suffering is something that needs to be avoided at all costs. If people view pain and suffering with that attitude, it really blocks progress in life. Now, sometimes that's why it's really important, like we just let our rule bubble up because we need to address it if that's the way we look at it. Or pain and suffering is something that comes and goes. I mean, that's something people tell themselves, but doesn't necessarily strengthen us. It's just sort of it's a part of life, but that doesn't play to its purpose, its beneficial purpose for us. And what we want to do is kind of get more in touch with those insights. And they might say, you know, the more I suffer, the more I need to beat myself up for creating suffering in my life. That's what somebody said, right? Great. Now we've got this cycle of pain and suffering that just strengthens itself, right? And somebody said pain and suffering is something I must always try to alleviate in others so that I can feel good. That's a lot of pressure. Wow. Okay. So, yeah. So let's take, anyone have any thoughts on this so far? And then we'll take it and we'll score it 1 to 5.
I wrote that pain and suffering is a part of life. So it's something to be expected and it's natural. Yeah,
kind of a neutral rule. It's not energizing necessarily, but it's not discouraging. It's kind of in the middle of it's a middle of the road rule. Mm-hmm. But that's a step up because what's really good about that rule is the acceptance of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that acceptance is a stepping stone to excellence when it comes to a rule and attitude here.
Mhm.
So I think you're one step away.
I had said the best teacher, but I think my rule is very similar, because I think when you're in pain, it inspires you and you know you're learning and it's a period of growth, but I don't know that it encourages you to run towards it. It's just more a reactive rule.
Yeah. And sometimes the best thing to do is just listen to your own thoughts when you are in pain and suffering and see where your mind goes, and you'll pretty much find out your pain and suffering rule. Like, do you panic or do you get curious, right? Like, there's so many different ways that people respond to pain and suffering.
I mean, I think I don't run towards it though, if it's there, that's the thing. I mean, you were talking about somebody saying avoiding it at all costs. I don't know that I'm trying to avoid it at all costs, but I won't run in and embrace it thinking, oh, well, this is a good lesson. But if I'm in that moment, that's my attitude. So that's kind of what I was.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good point too. We need to have a healthy relationship with it. Right? Because a lot of times people just try to create more of it because they enjoy the hidden benefits. So it's something they run towards because that's what gets what feels like love and attention from people. It can be a strategy to meet the human need, right? So you definitely see people that kind of go towards it and have a pain and suffering, like worshiping rule, which can be a different kind of problem. But anyway, yeah, good thoughts.
I was thinking about, a friend of mine who called me today, and she's grieving the sudden loss of her boyfriend, whom she found dead in bed, and had left him the night before and tried to wake him up, and he just wouldn't. She's coming up on that 1-year anniversary when she went to find out why he wasn't answering the phone. And she's struggling right now in a huge way, in so much pain, that because time has forced her now to come up on these events as the days are playing out here before his death and the anniversary of it. And I told her that the best way to navigate through her grief is to embrace the pain, that you can't get around it, that you've got to get through it. But as we're sitting here talking about this tonight, I think about children who have pain and suffering from abuse, unjust things at such a young age, and just the innocence of that. And I don't know that I would say to a kid that you just have to endure it. The only way to get around it is to get through it. So when when I test what pain and suffering is, it's difficult for me to line up, okay, how would I say that to, depending upon where they are in the pain and the suffering in that. So this is a good one for me to go through tonight, and I can't wait to put my numbers up against mine.
Yes, yeah, and you bring up a good point. There's so much complexity to this rule. It is one of the most difficult rules to optimize, because I've got 14 that I share with people when I'm helping them find a better rule, because of what kind of a rule is needed at that time. We need a rule that might go in one of many different directions, right? Because there's so many different ways to be sensitive, but also, strengthen ourselves. So let's go into scoring it. There's 5 things. And as long as you know these criteria, these 5 questions, Patty, then you know how to potentially formulate a rule that might serve for that moment, just working in some of the nuances of that situation. So, number 1, does the rule lend itself to peaceful acceptance instead of creating too much pressure? Peaceful acceptance. So that's key, that we're able to accept that this is a part of reality, right? Because it is. And so we want to have a harmonious attitude with it in order to harmonize with reality. Does it lead to a peaceful acceptance? Number 1. Number 2, does it lead to an attitude of embracing it when it comes, rather than an attitude of avoiding it? Right? We just need to just embrace it, like it's here. Okay, fine, it's here. This is happening in my life. Okay. I'm just gonna work with this now. Right? So if somebody says, pain and suffering is something I don't deserve more of, that's kind of an attitude of avoiding, right? If somebody says pain and suffering is something that shouldn't happen, that's not really embracing either, right? Number 3, does it encourage and energize you instead of dampening your enthusiasm? Does it encourage and energize you, right? Believe it or not, you can have an attitude towards pain and suffering that does encourage and energize you. Number 4, does it focus you on what matters most in life? Does it focus you on what matters most in life? Right? So, for example, Charmaine had said that pain and suffering is the best teacher. I would give her rule a point on this one because it's got her focused on learning. What is it teaching me? Yeah, great. And that's one of the most important things in life, is that we learn from our experiences, right? And then number 5, does your rule about pain and suffering support your life goals instead of serving as a roadblock? Because for most people, it serves as a roadblock because they make comfort their top priority. So they avoid swallowing their pride. They avoid apologizing. They avoid admitting mistakes. They avoid doing hard things. They avoid vulnerability. They avoid working out. They avoid all kinds of pain and suffering, right? So at this point, we should all have a score out of 5 on our pain and suffering rule. And for most people, this rule is a 0. Like if your rule is a 0 on this one, that's totally fine, right? Like anyone who's like that, because that's basically the way we're conditioned once again, right? So does anyone have any thoughts you want to share on like good ways we could look at pain and suffering, healthy ways that might empower us? I'm going to read out mine and share them with all of you, but anyone have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going through lots of pain and suffering, going through tests after test and learning something new that's hard for me. So getting out of my comfort zone means that I do have to go through some pain and suffering or learning something new. So pain and suffering to me is critical in some cases to achieve something that is hard, out of my comfort zone, that I might not be good at, but it doesn't have to be forever.
There you go. So that's an awesome attitude to have, right? Because basically you're talking about pain and suffering is a temporary experience that can open me up to new wisdom, new experiences, new habits, new people that I wouldn't have come into contact with otherwise.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Nailed it. Look at pain and suffering like that for the rest of your life, you're good, right? Like,
I think that the things that we remember in life and the lessons we learn the most are the ones that, there's emotion surrounding it, and it comes in those high pressure situations. And I think my brain thinks differently and everything kind of works differently. It kind of removes a bunch of the roadblocks that you normally have when you don't have that same level of emotion or pain or suffering attached to it. And so in a sense, it just kind of puts my brain on fire and helps me kind of just like laser focus and move through things.
perfect. So I would say, we could say, pain and suffering is a master teacher, because when you learn through pain, tears, and heartbreak, you remember the lessons better, right? Like it's a master teacher, leads to progress, right? We could also say it's a pathway to greatness, because suffering is a test that makes us stronger and more free. Without suffering to strengthen us, we become weak and fragile. That's why you hear a lot of these stories about really strong, successful people who had really hard experiences in life. And it was the pain and suffering that strengthened them for great things in their life. And when I come across somebody that's experienced a major tragedy of some sort, I'm always like, you know what? There's something about people who go through this kind of an experience like you're going through in your life right now. They're being prepared to do some really good work in future. It's possible you could be doing this to gain wisdom and insight and experience to help others who go through the same thing in future. Right?
I think it propels growth.
Yeah, you are being prepared to help other people even more. But you have to go through it first. You have to get your PhD in this pain and suffering so that you can coach people on it later on. And that's the most fulfilling thing of life. Think of this as a sacrifice for future people you're going to help. You are relevant to them because you're going through it. You're going to have that firsthand experience. Right? And that can be for anything. That can be like, hey, you're going through a divorce. Well, guess what? You're going to have the awesome opportunity to help other people out because you're going to pick up wisdom and experience that you're going to be able to pass on to others to ease them of suffering. Or whether it's going through a major grief or something like that, you're going to be one who's so good at comforting others after the insights you get of going through this, right? We might also look at it as a friend and guide. Pain and suffering as a friend and guide. It gives us motivation to make better choices in life, right? Like a lot of times when we're living in alignment with vices, selfishness, anger, reactivity, laziness, like all these different dishonesty, all these different vices, pain and suffering comes to make it difficult to continue too far down that path. And it's almost like that spiritual GPS. It makes it uncomfortable for us to keep going in the wrong direction, right? Keeps us humble, keeps us from getting too worldly. You got to remember that all pain and suffering can be controlled and managed through a shift in attention, focus, and attitude. That's key. We can actually control it. So you could also say that, suffering is from the ego. And if it wasn't uncomfortable, it would grow too powerful, right? We suffer because we over-identify with the human body and we over-identify with this reality as the ultimate reality. And so sometimes things are taken away from us, opportunities and things like that, so that we don't get too attached to this reality.
It also helps change your reality as well. Pain and suffering is also a burst of energy. That's why I've always referred to it as rocket fuel, because things that you would normally not be able to do, that pain, that emotional pain, can actually push you to do those things you weren't able to do before. So that extra burst of energy will help change and redefine you as you start to tackle things you couldn't tackle before. Now you made it over that hump. Now you're made it to the next level, or at least proceeding to the next level. You got that initial burst out of your initial orbit, just like a rocket does. So when that rocket breaks the orbit of your original world, you're in space, you're moving past what was roadblocking you before to go to another place. You can redirect that energy to redefine your life in any way you want. But that is energy that can be utilized to make your life better.
There you go. It can be a kickstart for you, right? So
absolutely.
And there's one rule I really like. I threw it into the chat. It's pain and suffering is grace. You might think, what have I done wrong to deserve this? But sometimes it's what you've done right that drew this to you. So you could suffer as you're suffering. Remember that freedom comes through pain as well as through joy. And that comes from Swami Kriyananda, 1992, a lecture he gave. But I love that one. I'm like, that one is so good.
It's interesting because Chris was comparing it to rocket fuel, but I think sometimes it also helps you let go. Because I think I have more of an instinct to stay and fight and dig in. And sometimes I need that pain to make me stop and think and really reflect, is this a battle I should be in? Or is it a case where I need to release things. So I think it can very much depend on the situation as well.
Yeah. And that we could also call it a coach. We could say pain and suffering is a coach. It pushes us towards what we need to do in order to progress, whether that's to let go or to push forward. Right? So we could look at it that way. But that's an excellent way. I mean, all of these are really good rules. And depending on circumstance, one rule might serve us better than another. And also depending on somebody's reality. We need to be able to relate to the reality of other people. And so, I can't necessarily say to somebody like, look, pain and suffering is actually a form of redemption, preventing you from getting too worldly and too attached to your human body as the true self, and too attached to this. If people are really, because delusion has its own reality. So if I say that to somebody, there's just going to be a complete block on that. If they're really over-identified with the body and really egotistical, they're going to be like, oh man, you're full of it, right? Like it's going to go over like a lead balloon, right? So we need to be able to just finesse in a rule that works for us. You could also say, pain and suffering is a setup for salvation. The greater the suffering, the more triumphant the salvation. And if it hasn't come in this lifetime, then it's not the end. Think long range and keep 1 foot in eternity. So I came up with that rule just because there were some cases in which people were thinking with too much of a finality for this incarnation, that everything had to be resolved in this lifetime. Yeah. So we want to be able to think a little bit more long-term. It can be, you could call it, you might also call pain and suffering a great cleanser of karma, right? There's a whole bunch of different ways you could look at it. I'm going to take a whole bunch of my rules and throw them into the chat.
How about an attention getter?
Oh yeah, you want the attention getter rule in there?
Yeah, I think that's an attention getter.
yeah, I know. I think that one scored a 0 out of 5, but I could be wrong. But
it makes you wake up and take notice and figure things out, right?
That's true. That's true. There you go. There's 4 of them in there. And then any other thoughts on the pain and suffering rule? Any thoughts on any of this stuff?
I appreciated Charmaine's comment about how pain and suffering can get you to finally stop doing something and learning to let go. So now I realize in my rocket fuel analogy that rocket fuel amount is a very finite amount of energy. It is not perpetual. It's not sustainable either. So when that pain and suffering is pushing you, you need to take advantage of it while it's hot, while the energy is still being expanded, because eventually that energy will dissipate, it will disappear, and then you'll not have that same energy to push through certain roadblocks or through certain humps to get through. So you have to use the energy while it's there, because it will dissipate and disappear eventually.
I love how it's evolving.
There you go. Excellent. Yeah. So that's the pain and suffering rule. So just to recap, we came up with 4 rules today. We all have these unspoken rules we live by. And if you don't know your rules, then they are ruling you. And that might not be a good thing. If we want all of these to be 5 out of 5 empowering, we need to have a good rule for the success of other people, because if not, we can be prone to jealousy and resentment and bitterness and hopelessness. We need to have a good rule on our own worthiness, because that gives us fuel and strength to be our true selves and to do what we're really here for. We need to have a really good rule on rejection. It's a part of life. It's like that. And we need to have a good rule on pain and suffering, because if we are too fearful of pain and suffering, we won't really live. And it's important to take this serious, because this stuff is relevant to all of us. So I think the key things now are to reinforce your new rules. Like, just make sure you got 4 good new rules, because these are a part of your reality from cradle to grave. Your focus creates your reality. If you can shift your focus, you can shift your reality. And each of these rules can do that. You can reinforce it and ask yourself, how is this rule true? How can I live this rule more deeply? Collect evidence, confirmation bias to prove your rule to yourself. Apply it in your life. Try to stay in touch with it as best you can. Whether that, usually I say twice a day. When you're still learning it, it needs to be intense. Immerse yourself in it twice a day. Most people go after self-improvement with a very half-hearted effort, and it's never enough to really make the change stick, right? And the exciting thing is that there's more rules and ways of shifting our attitude towards these things in reality that we can address in future. This was part 2. We did part 1 June 28th and posted it on YouTube. It's still there. And so this is part 2. All right, so let's go into key takeaways. Key takeaways from tonight. Chris, why don't you start us off?
Well, I'm going to start off by channeling my inner Joel and asking, is there going to be a handout on this?
Yeah, I'll throw it in the chat. I'll throw it in the messenger.
Cool. Key takeaways. I appreciated being able to break down my original beliefs that were not empowering me and asking better questions of them to qualify them in a better way. And that helped me to really realize that how disempowering these simple beliefs I have. You think that they're little easy little headlines, even though they're disempowering, but you can see the damage that they really do when you start to ask those questions. And when you ask those better questions, you can now qualify future beliefs by giving it that criteria to see if it is a belief worth empowering, worth emulating, and worth conditioning. So we're now consciously picking our beliefs and using this criteria to see if they are beliefs worth having.
Love it. You know, you just described that perfectly. Like, you just summed it all up so perfectly. I love it. You nailed it. You nailed it.
Cool.
That's a tough act to follow. Who wants to go next? Chris just did such an awesome job summing that. You summed it up better than I could have. Charmaine, you want to go next? What are your key takeaways from tonight?
I think people always tell me I never met a rule I didn't like, and I'm so much a rule follower, but I realize there's lots of areas I don't have rules. Or they're very personalized, to individual situations and people. And I would do a lot better to kind of come up with more universal rules or universal truths that, that stand, not only to propel me forward, but also to keep me from giving into some of the weakness of taking some of those things too far. So there's definitely a balance there, but having a rule about it that I can be as solid about Jocko saying good would be a good thing for me to have that place to go, because I'm good at rules. I just need them apparently.
I would say it, to add to it, to deepen it, rather than just saying good, I would say, why is it good? And rep it out to fatigue. Because there's something called positive illusions where people will just kind of like just whitewash it with like, oh, it's positive, but they're not truly convinced deep to the core of their being. And so I see this kind of like pseudo positive psychology that sometimes, and Jocko's probably sincere and means it on a deep level, and he's doing it, but I think we could emulate it, but not really mean it. So I think it's good to say, why is it good? Why is it good? Rep that out to fatigue so that when you say good, it's just the tip of an iceberg.
I think, because what I was struck by is how quickly that shifts the attitude and you don't live in that space. And so on one hand, I really like the one word for shifting you, but I agree to know kind of where to go there. You need to go deeper and understand it. But then maybe once you're there, that one word can help redirect you much faster than lots of longer thoughts.
Yeah, I'd 1-2 punch it. Good. Why is it good? And then let the thought flow go in that direction. But that's a good transition thought. Yeah, and I love the way you articulate that. So well done. Excellent. Good for you. Good for you. Celine, how about you next? Key takeaways. And Celine, awesome to see you again. It's been a while. I feel like I haven't seen you in forever.
Yeah, I know. I'm out of the cave that I was in. My biggest takeaway tonight is the part about the worthiness. You know, that not having it connect to other people. You know, that's tough. You know, as a mom.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say part of it is very tough. I find moms, it's such a tough area because the intent is in the right place. We want to help. We want to love. But our worthiness, we are more strengthened if our worthiness is all about our potential to help rather than what we're doing in the moment. Because a lot of times moms are doing the best they can, and maybe they're not appreciated, or maybe the family's having a bad day, or they're not receptive. And I don't think their worthiness should suffer for that, especially when they're doing the right things. I think they deserve feeling worthy no matter what the outcomes happen to be in the moment. It's a tough one, but you're right. That is one that definitely gets people.
Yeah.
I'm just a big fan of moms. I think they're the unsung heroes of society. Like, we celebrate, you know, all these like celebrities and these top people that are major media, but we don't realize like how much like people suffer on a regular basis, and they sacrifice for others on so many different ways, and they aren't appreciated and celebrated as role models the way they should be. So thank you for mentioning and bringing that up. Patty Baker.
I think for me, my biggest takeaway, although there were so many tonight, and this was such a great forum this evening. Thanks for facilitating it, Brendan, as always. Is I give better advice to everybody else than I give myself. So that's it. At the end of the day, that's where it's at. I'm telling you, I give great advice to everybody, except for me.
Have you ever thought about why that is?
And I think, I really think, well, I'm sure there's a lot of deeper issues, but for me, just based upon going through these, I was great on the success one, and then I just started going downhill from there. But I've had a lot of experience in success and failure, you know, but I've not really had to sit around and think about what I'm thinking about or what I'm feeling about rejection and pain and suffering and things like that. I think it's easy to say a few cliches to kind of hide behind it until you can get past it, but really to walk through it and sort it out and say what you believe in. In general, I don't think people they can stand on a platform, but oftentimes don't know why they're standing there. And so these beliefs allowed me to say, man, I'm pretty strong in this. And I'm like, no, I'm not, but I'm really strong in giving it to other people. So I think just really being more mindful in some self-reflection and time for self-reflection, especially when I'm feeling a certain way. Even tonight, just thinking about how, you know, one way I feel this about worthiness, and then if I give it a second thought, I'm like, yeah, but wait, when I press up against somebody else, I feel like this, and it creates disunity, you know, within me. So just a self-realization, I think more than anything, is a good place to start.
That's the beauty of having someone that can challenge your beliefs too, though, because we don't take the time to reflect on it. I had somebody ask me this, or I can't remember how it came up. We had storms here, ice storms. And they had said something to me years ago, why do you always drive in the middle lane? And I had no idea whenever they asked me. And then when it came up again, they're like, do you remember me asking you this years ago? And I'm like, yeah, and I knew exactly why I drove in the middle lane. But I didn't remember the two conversations until they brought it up. But it's one of those things. I had no idea why I did. But then when they brought it up again, I knew. And there were very logical reasons I did. I just hadn't brought them into my conscious mind when they asked me the first time. So unless somebody challenges us on some of these things, we don't necessarily think about it or know why we're acting the way we're acting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of this, a lot of the ways in which we struggle with some of these rules, rejection, worthiness, it really comes back to Patty. I think you're really hitting the mark on self-realization. We forget who we really are and what we're really capable of. And that's why some of this stuff gets to us. I wish for you, Patty Baker, you know what I wish for you?
Please do share.
I wish you could see yourself the way that I see you.
I know.
But in answer to
And
your
more-
question, Patty, I think we want to inspire others and encourage them to do better. But when it comes to us, we're very judgmental. And I think we know that we're the only ones that can shift and do things differently. So we're hard on ourselves because we haven't done it so far. Instead of seeing our potential and seeing what we can do and encouraging us to make different choices going forward, we're reflecting on our past choices. Patty's processing, I see it.
I know, right? I'm thinking about it, but yeah. And gosh, part of it is rooted for me in finding my value, in finding my worth, in giving value to others. And so I want to be able to be worthy enough to receive that value myself. And I am worthy enough to receive that value myself.
Nice. And I also like to, one of the things I like to think about is, if you take one of the most worthy and valuable paintings out there, I've never seen the Mona Lisa. I don't think it's the greatest painting out there, but I guess I have different tastes than the majority of the planet. But if you were to judge the Mona Lisa after the first few paint strokes, you might not think it was that great, but it wasn't done yet. In the same way, I would say that each of you are a masterpiece that is not done yet. So we should suspend judgment, because it's when we start judging ourselves without respecting ourselves for being a work in progress with high potential that we start to get caught up in these disempowering thoughts. So just think of that like that. You're a masterpiece in progress. That's it. All right, let's do go team on 3. Everybody ready? 1, 2, 3. Go team.
Go team! I love
Go
you all.
team.
Have a great week.
Love you guys.
Bye, guys. Have a good week.
Have a great week, guys. Love you.